I'm Vin.
I'm Sori.
That's Sparky. And we...
Making his debut.
Making his debut. Well, I mean, if he was missing, that means this is not his debut.
Well, it's his debut back there. Different spot. Let's
and we are about to do... No, the people need to see what I endure. We are about to review Parkway Drive. Mm-hmm. Another band from Australia. Yeah, I don't know what the deal is with these Australian bands. Habla Viscaris is Australian. Thy Art is Murder is Australian.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah. And so is this band.
That's interesting.
Oh, something about being Australian makes you an angry, talented metalhead. Maybe, are you from Australia?
No, but I don't know anything about them, so I'm like, what do they have to be angry about? Every time I think of Australians, I think everything's good. They've got horses and...
Kangaroos?
Yep. No, I picture well, I used to watch this movie when I was a kid, and it was based in Australia, and they had these really beautiful white horses, so...
Yeah, I feel like the more we talk about Australia, the more trouble we could potentially get into. So let's just go to the song.
Stop now.
This song is Exhibit A of... Squeaky Wheel, Getting the Grease.
Yep.
This song has been pushed a bunch. It is Wishing Wells by Parkway Drive.
Okay.
Should be interesting.
Let's go.
The last thing that you wish for is no sight. It's the face to face the pain. Do your living for your own. Drown you in your wishing wells. Do your living for your own. Damn you all. 'Cause tonight I'm killing you.
Wow. I think that song had an epic feel to it, though. First of all, you can't kill God. But if he was just a god like the rest of the other gods, then that's a pretty crazy song. Like, because tonight I'm killing gods.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the concept of killing God, we've talked about it before. Mm-hmm. I forgot the name of the philosopher, but he basically talked about God is dead and we have killed him is a famous phrase.
Uh-huh.
And the idea was that we
killed the idea of God.
Well, we've killed him with unbelief because now we're so educated, right? Now we're so smart that we've killed God. So the concept of killing God, that's a philosophical sort of concept. It's post-enlightenment. We're enlightened now. We don't need all the superstitious junk and the God of the gaps and all that craziness. So we don't need God anymore.
Well, this one is not saying that, though. I don't think, because he's saying I spoke a vow today and asked God if he would come and play. So
Yeah.
I mean, he's still saying he's talking to God and telling him come and play just so he can kill him. So I feel like that doesn't go along with it, because it's not like saying we're above the belief of God and we've expanded our minds so much that we know that there is no God because there's things outside of it. You know what I mean? Like, that's different to me than saying, look, motherfucker, because that's what he says. I'm killing him today, That's different. Swear jar. I found out there's a 9-year-old listening to our stuff. We need to get a swear jar. I was like, what?
I don't know what this is.
I was going to put something. Just put something in the swear jar. Put that in there. This is the beginning of the swear jar.
Your discretion advised. Yeah, but I don't know if this guy really obviously musically he doesn't think he's I don't think he literally believes he's gonna kill God.
Well, no, because God's not listening to him.
Right. He just won't answer me, that type of thing. So killing God, I heard a guy say one time that when God doesn't behave in the way that we'd like him to, we punish him with unbelief.
Oh yeah, I had a family member that she had oh God, this is terrible. She would take this picture of Jesus, and when God didn't give her what she wanted, she'd turn him and put him in the corner.
La ilaha illallah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like, when he says I'm killing God, I think what he's talking about is, this is my night of unbelief. This is where I'm transitioning into believing there's no God. That's what I think is happening. I don't think that he's saying he's really going to kill God. Like, he's not saying... Well, yeah,
I felt like...
Because if he's a god, obviously he doesn't believe that him and his puny human nature is going to be able to do anything to the Almighty.
I just felt like that he was angry and like... when the kids, sometimes they're bad just because they want attention?
Yeah.
Like, I felt like that God wasn't answering him, and so he, like, probably the resentment and the frustration and everything grew and grew and grew until finally he was like... come and face me, but at the same time, like, yeah, he's saying that he wants to kill God, but
Yeah, but what does the metaphor for kill God mean, you think, in this song?
Well,
Because I'm agreeing with you. I do think it's about lashing out. But again, I think, how does a created being attack or fight their creator? Because the scripture says without faith it's impossible to please God. So as far as this world is concerned, God's highest value is faith. Believe in me.
yeah.
So the only way that you can hurt God if you're immortal is to not believe in him. Disbelief is the only way that you can really attack a God that is infinitely more powerful than you.
Yeah.
So when he says tonight, I'm agreeing. I think he's lashing out, and I also think there's a sense in which it's like, you know, the teenager who's losing his way and wants some attention because he needs attention.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like he's lost someone, and a lot of times God dies with the people that we love.
Well, he said that. I've dug a shallow hole for him to sleep. Wait a minute, where is it? Was it at the beginning? And he said something about like the ones that that had gone before too. I'll bury him with the ones he keeps.
Right. Right.
So he probably had family members or people that he loved die,
Well,
and then.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is God dies with the people that we love, right? Like.
Well, yeah, I was just saying it was in the song.
Yeah, and I got that too from him. Was that that's what's going down for him. He's having that difficult time dealing with the fact that the people that he loves is dead. Of course, the silence of God has been a major theme in spiritual experience. Mm-hmm. This idea of God being quiet and then being quiet in very, very difficult moments.
Yep.
You know, there's that movie Noah.
Yep.
Remember that movie Noah? I mean, it was kind of crazy.
Yeah,
it wasn't very biblically accurate. But there was one moment with, I forgot, Tubal Cain was the bad guy. And Tubal Cain is talking to God, and he says, "Why won't you answer me? Why won't you speak to me? Am I not made in your image?" And so here he's this bad guy, and you kind of like, you have this fly on the wall moment where you see him talking to God, and he looks up and he says, "Why won't you speak to me? Why won't you talk to me?" And so
I always feel sad when people have those moments with God.
yeah,
I don't understand what God's doing, so I feel like, well, yeah, why don't you talk to them?
right. Because from our perspective, a lot of people, you know, are asking the big why question. Mm. And that's why he says he won't talk to me, because he's afraid. I call on out, is he afraid?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and to me, I think that the fear there is not, I don't think he's saying that God is afraid, but I think the questions that religion is designed to answer, because religion is designed to answer ultimate questions.
Yeah.
A lot of people are afraid to give a hurting person the answers to those questions. Like, for example, if God was so all-powerful, why did I lose these people?
Oh, yeah.
And so there's a lot of questions that religion is supposed to answer that a lot of representatives of religion are afraid to answer. Mm-hmm. And then that's where you get this whole concept of you can't question God, right? It's not because God is afraid to answer, it's because the people who represent him are afraid.
And they're supposed to be his mouthpiece, you mean? Are you saying that? You're saying that the reason that God is not answering on certain things is because we're supposed to explain these things to people?
No, I'm just saying the lyric in the song where he says, "I call on out, is he afraid?"
Yes.
Right? And so I'm taking this whole concept of killing God in the song to be, I'm going to disbelieve.
Yes.
I'm going to disbelieve. This is a night where I stop holding on to any last vestiges of belief that I had, and I'm going into disbelief. And that moment of real disbelief is the moment that I kill God, I think is the point of the song. So...
He doesn't show up, though, right?
Who, God?
Yeah.
Well,
so
no.
in that sense, he doesn't lose his belief? Because he doesn't kill God if God didn't show up?
No, I think that it's the opposite. I think the fact that God won't show up is what ends up with the singer killing God. Because God won't show up and talk to him, he's just gonna disbelieve.
The devil and God have died inside of me. Oh, you're right.
Right?
You're right.
I'm not believing
I didn't
that.
understand that line. I'm like, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
But they died inside of him. Yes, because inside of him he doesn't believe in either one of them anymore.
Right. Well, and you know, we had a conversation with a friend yesterday where we talked about a lot of times religious people said all the bad stuff is from the devil, and all the good stuff is from God.
Right. Right.
which is not biblical. You know, when the bad stuff happens
Surprise.
when bad stuff happens in, I think there's a book called Lamentations. Lamentations is kind of like My Dying Bride level metal in the Bible. So there's like heavy, like chemical warfare.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of like the Joshua, the Old Testament battle passages.
Okay.
And then you've got like standard rock and roll, which is the Psalms. But Lamentations is just, Revelation is kind of like Slayer. Bodies like dormant, no life. But Lamentations is like the doom, like slow, depressing metal, and it's dealing with this concept that God's people are being wrecked and they're being slaughtered, and the kids are fainting because of famine and all this shit, and moms are eating their own children because they're starving to death, and it's one of my favorite chapters. It's chapter 3, and it says, "Why should a young man among the living complain when he's punished for his sins?" And then it says, "Is it not from the hand of the Lord that both good and evil come?" So the punishment part, I'm not really applying to this song, but it's biblically speaking, there's this constant lack of trying to protect God's reputation, where God comes out and says, "It's from my hand that both good and evil come." Mm-hmm. Like it's not like I'm saying, it's not like God and devil are in an arm wrestling match, and the devil wins one round and God wins one round. So when bad shit happens, you go, "Oh, that was the devil."
Well, yeah.
And then the good stuff happens, you go, "Oh, that's God." That's not the biblical picture. It's God is saying they both come from me, and the characters in the scripture, they will go through these evolutions of thought, right? So like Job will say, Job was a guy, he had everything he could ever wanted, and in 2 days everything is gone. Like his kids, his family, his riches, his health, it's all gone. And Job says, "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord."
Yep.
And you're like, "Oh, okay." But as the book progresses, Job begins to say, "Wait a second." And Job actually says, "Face me," to God.
Yep.
Job actually says, Job actually looks up to the sky in the scripture and calls for a trial. And he says, "I want him to come down, and I want somebody to speak my case to him." He's like, "I would make my case to him," Job says. And then, of course, God shows up, and Job is like, "I didn't really mean that." Just kidding.
Is that when he says, "I repent in dust and ashes"?
Yeah. He said, "I spoke." He said, "I spoke of things that I didn't understand." Right?
Yeah. Well, I think I kind of had experienced that when I went through a phase after having my first daughter, that I had a miscarriage and lost a child and couldn't get pregnant, and it wasn't going very good. And in the Bible, it ends up saying that like God like opens and closes a woman's womb, and it was crazy because when like other people that were religious, they would be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, blah blah blah," and then I would tell them that I'd be like, "Well, like God opens and closes the womb," and they were like, "No, people didn't want to hear that."
Yeah.
They wanted to change my mind on it. I'm like, "Yeah, but that's what it says. I mean, God's in control of all those things," but they didn't want to have any. Like, they did not want God being tied up with the fact that, he just wasn't giving me children at the time that I wanted them. So, it was interesting because there was some people that I always thought to be wildly religious people. And then, but when you try to say something like that to even them, nope.
But those are the questions. When he says, "Is God afraid?" Obviously, God's not afraid of them, but his representatives are afraid to go there. Mm-hmm. But the scripture is not afraid to go there. It's, it's, "I'm the Lord, I create darkness, I create light. Mm-hmm. I bring good and I bring disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things." And so I think when he says the devil plays a minor role here. And this is actually this is actually some pretty accurate theology, in the sense that he's holding God more accountable than the devil.
Yeah, he says, "If you have any part in it, I'm going after you too," but mostly it's going after God.
Forget theology, just use the logic. Just use logic and think. If I'm saying that God is all powerful and he created the devil, then there's nothing the devil can do that God couldn't overrule.
Right.
As a matter of fact, you see in Job where God says, "Okay, you can do this and that's all you can do." Mm-hmm. And the author of Job doesn't say, Job's friends comforted him for all the trouble that the devil brought on him. It says Job's friends comforted him for all the trouble that Yahweh brought upon him. So that even though the devil was like the primary actor in like, destroying his house and all this stuff and killing his kids, the author of Job still attributes it to Yahweh because Yahweh was the one that gave permission for Satan to do that.
Right.
Which means
Right.
that he had an intention and a purpose behind it.
Right. And it wasn't to destroy Job.
No, it wasn't to destroy Job. But, there are certain things that, in life that you can't get other than going through some trial or some period of pain.
Yeah, we've talked about that before.
The incendiary shockwave scorched...
I think the last time that we talked about it, it upset some people because they were like, basically, that's not a good enough reason. Just because you're going to have some growth from it, like that's not a good enough reason for why horrible things happen. Deaths of family members and, horrible events happening to people just because you're going to grow from it. Like that seems like such a terrible, like most people would sacrifice the growth to have the person with them still. Like it's not a good enough, a satisfactory enough answer.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on what you think the purpose of life is. That's the issue.
What do you mean?
So, like, everybody's coming, when something like this happens and they hold God accountable for these, and I'm not saying this sarcastically, I'm saying it in the sense of, obviously, we're in no position to hold the Almighty accountable. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm cool and all that stuff, but I still got my theology pretty rooted. But if your perspective on life is that your life is just supposed to be about you and the people you love with no regard for God at all, then of course it doesn't make sense. Of course you would trade it. Mm-hmm. Of course. But if life isn't about me or even you, if life is about him, then what you just said makes no sense, right? Mm-hmm. Of course, from an emotional perspective, the characters in the Bible don't have simple solutions. Like, for example, Job asked God all these questions throughout the book. God shows up and answers not one of his questions. Mm-hmm. Rather, God shows up and says, well, where were you when I created the world? Where were you in this? Where are the storehouses of the frost and the snow?
I think he tries to show him his own insufficiency and makes him realize that who are you to go questioning God?
There's lots of things you don't know.
If you don't believe in God, let's say you don't believe in God, but let's say there actually is a God and that what we're saying is actually true. And then you think about that, you're like, if he really was all the things that's said about him, then it would be crazy for like us to go up and just be like, you would question God, like, what?
Well, I think there's different ways to question, right? Like you can question as a prosecutor or you can question as a child.
Yes, I was just thinking as a kid. Yeah.
Right, so a prosecutor has already, the nature of their business is to convict the person of some sort of guilt, right? Mm-hmm. Where a child is going to say, what this action that you did doesn't match what I know about you as a father. Mm-hmm. And we've had many of those conversations with God. We're still in process with those conversations with God. And I think there's a ton of times when people question God, and biblically speaking, they are encouraged, and whole books are written about them questioning with God, Job being the primary, but even Jesus takes a questioner role in the ultimate question, why have you forsaken me, right?
That's true.
So questioning God is not a problem. I've always said, like, God is big enough to handle our doubt and our frustration and our pain. Mm-hmm. And I think a song, and I always say things like, he said some pretty irreverent stuff here. He's going to bring the fucker down and blah, blah, blah. And of course, for me, I would never use language like that to God ever in my life because I've known him since before I could speak, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we had this question during the Judith record where Maynard was really, really angry. He's talking to his mom. He's saying, it's not like you killed someone. And we said, okay, what is a more acceptable act of worship? Or if you were to take the word worship out and replace it with engagement of God. Mm-hmm. A Christian who's in church who is feeling the exact same thing, but is pretending. Versus the guy who says stuff like this and is being 100% real. Right. To me, this anthem of unbelief is actually this guy's like last attempt at trying to believe something. Mm-hmm. So it's like a kid that says, I'm going to run away from home. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Foot's out the door. Yeah,
I'm packing my bag.
You want your parent to chase you, and it's one of those things. I think, to me, that's one of the most unanswerable questions in the world. It's not why bad things happen to good people, because I've pretty much figured that out. But why God remains silent when people cry to Him. That, to me, is a difficult
more
question.
Difficult. Yeah, I would agree with that.
And Jesus taking part in that, He asked that question, "Why have you forsaken me?" And there was no voice from heaven.
That answered that question.
There's no voice from heaven. I mean, that was it. So I think that those are important questions to ask, and this guy is wrestling with it in a very honest way. What did you think about when he said the scorched? He said something about like the scorched earth. I gotta pull these lyrics up. The incendiary shockwave, scorched earth policy, the devastation that only loss will leave. The chants and incantations of daily ritual, the subtle lapse in brutal honesty.
The incendiary. How do you say that word?
Incendiary.
What does it mean?
Remember, like in Gears, when you'd have the incendiary grenade and everything gets set on fire. It's that, like, your whole world gets set on fire when you lose somebody.
Scorched earth policy.
Yeah, scorched earth policy is in war.
Yeah.
Where you just go and you like tear everything apart. 'Cause it's an agricultural, community. So not only are you going to kill people, you're going to like completely scorch the earth, so that the surviving people stay in this state of just ruin.
Oh, the devastation that only loss will leave. Yep. The chants and incantations of daily rituals, a subtle lapse in brutal honesty. Now, the chants and incantations of daily rituals, when I first read that, it makes me think of when you're just going through the mundane, you're just going through the rituals to get through the day. But then a subtle lapse in brutal honesty, is that because you're on like that, you're just doing the thing, so you're not like being brutally honest in that moment?
Well, now the person's gone.
Yeah.
And so those daily things that you hear all the time from a person, that they're no longer there. Oh. And it hits you with that brutal honesty. Losing a person.
But a lapse, doesn't that mean it stopped for a little bit?
No, what stopped was the chants and daily rituals, and then or it could mean that the chants and incantations give him a lapse in brutal honesty.
Yeah, that's what I thought it meant.
Is an escape from brutal honesty. Okay.
Yes, that's what I was saying.
Yeah. Okay, I can go with that. Ask me how I'm coping, I'll tell you I'm just fine, while deep down inside I scream till I... Yeah. It's interesting, though. Here's the thing. He won't be honest with people.
Nope. But he'll be honest with God.
But he's very, very honest with God. And this tells me something about this guy's... I'm sure we'll probably do an interview with this guy at some point, inshallah. But, I'm sure he might say that he's an unbeliever, but it's interesting that he is so brutally honest with God, but other people, I'm good. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The last thing
do you know anyone like that?
The last thing that you wish for is the face to face the pain. Whew. Yeah. I think the concept of blame, like where do you place the blame for losing people, is such an important...
You said that at one point, like, just...
like we've had conversations where I'm like, every time something bad happens, somebody doesn't need to be blamed. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But I think I'm the exception and not the rule.
Yeah.
I think, even Sparky would probably, like we just have this thing where we just, like, want to blame somebody when something happens. Like, we can't just let the thing be.
No, but
somebody
if you blame
has to
something,
be
it takes some of the pressure off.
How?
There's all this pressure.
Pressure to what?
Because then you say, oh, well, that's why it happened. I mean, that was out of my control.
Oh, it's to put some logic and reason behind what happened?
No, it's to say, like, if I did something and then I'm like, well, I'm the reason that happened. But if I'm not the reason, then I feel better knowing I'm not the reason, because not only did the bad thing happen, but I'm the cause of the bad thing, then that means there's so much more piled on me as far as like just feeling terrible.
So being able to...
But if you could blame somebody else and you're like, wow, that's terrible and I'm going to have to deal with the pain of what happened, but at least it's
a real act of love then for God in the Bible to say, I did it.
Yeah.
It's on me. He's basically saying, all right, put it on me, blame me.
Yeah. Yep.
Because he's got the shoulders to handle that stuff. That's a good point. But you always want somebody to blame, but that can get really dangerous. I was reading a stat one time that when a child dies, like the divorce rate is like 60% or something.
Oh my
crazy
gosh,
like
I know. I've read stories too.
So if you can't find that place to really locate your pain in a productive way, I mean, it becomes extremely destructive. Damn you all, because tonight I'm killing gods.
I know, I'm so like that though. Like when the kids want to climb a tree or do something like that, I'm like, and then you're like, yeah, go for it. I'm like,
right. So you've already got it set up that if something happens, you can blame Vinny and you'll be able to deal with it. I spoke of Val today and asked God if he would come out and play. He just wants to cut him down. Of course, the ironic thing is in Christian theology, that's exactly what happened. Because we believe that God came in the person of Jesus Christ.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we did. We cut him down. As a matter of fact, that's the terminology that's used, I think, in Daniel 7. It says, anointed one shall be cut off.
yep.
So that's a really interesting angle of the cross I never really thought about, is that on the cross, Jesus is bearing the anger of people's anger at God. And
I never thought of that either.
yeah, people always say things like, oh, why don't God just come down? And well, if he came down, you'd murder him because you got all this pent-up anger at him. Because you've got it's really interesting because everybody always is confused about why, on the one hand, Jesus was celebrated by all these people and then they were so easily turned. People turned against him. And I think that for everybody that Jesus healed, there were other people that he didn't heal.
Right.
For everybody.
Puts that resentment in them. Why not me? Why that
right,
one?
Why not me? Right. And it's a really strange thing to get suddenly angry at God when your family member dies, because since we shot this video, thousands of people's family members have died, and that's okay. And look, I've you guys know me. I've lost some very, very important people in my life in some very tragic and sudden ways. So now, because it's happened to me, now I'm going to disbelieve in God. Now I'm going to be angry. Now I'm going to do all this when it's been happening to people for millennia.
Oh yeah, but we don't feel what's been happening to other people.
Well,
Unless they're close to us.
Yeah.
And in which case,
it doesn't
that's why
inform
affects us.
it doesn't inform our relationship with God. I don't really have the answer for why he doesn't show up to people and talk to people. And that's why the cross is such an important moment in history for me. Because, it was a time when Jesus was met with God's silence.
Yep.
And so in those moments, I just hang on to that, and it gets me through.
I guess you'd have to say, what did it not say? Or okay, because we know that the Father loved the Son unconditionally, ridiculously.
Right.
So that means when God is silent, when we're in a painful situation, it's not because he doesn't love us. Or you know what I mean? Like kind of going through those things and say, okay, what does it not say? It doesn't say this because
Right.
of how his relationship was with Jesus.
But if you've had that background for all your life, I think that there's a lot of pathologies that get developed if you were raised in a religious household. Mm-hmm. But I also think that we were given so many advantages as far as having a structure to handle human suffering. Mm-hmm. Because if you really, really look at the Bible, it doesn't give pat, easy answers, but they do give you real world answers that you can actually hold on to and go through life with, that are tried and tested.
Right.
Especially the story that we're caught up in, which is redemptive suffering. Mm-hmm. That suffering has a redemptive purpose to it somehow. That's my opinion. That I've come to is that whatever I'm going through is literally the best possible thing that could happen to me in that moment. And so I've come to that based on what I've known from start to finish of the Bible.
No, I think that you're right. I don't know necessarily that I'm like that in a given... No, I'm not like that. That's why I get so stressed out.
I know. And that's why you feel the need to blame people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And I'm not mad at you for it. I think it's a very natural reaction. I'm just saying, when I look at the story as a whole and the story that we're caught up in, and the stories of the people that intersect with us. You know, that's just how I feel about it. Although I will say, because we've had moments where you're praying and God like answers you, or he shows up in the room and you're like,
yeah.
God is here, like no doubter,
Yeah.
like. And there have been times when like out of nowhere, like nothing happened, and then like God's in the room, and then there are other times when you're like, okay, I'm really, you know, here we go, and there's nothing, and that actually helps me believe that this whole thing is real. Because if it could come on demand, then it'd be like, it's all psycho,
yeah.
you know. But this is. What did you think of the metal?
Oh, I loved it.
The metal was heavy, man.
Yeah, I liked his voice too.
I don't know if that was a synth or if that was a...
Whatever it was, it's really
Yeah,
cool.
the voice is like in a phone, right? Like at the beginning of the song.
Yeah, but it just
sounded
had
like he
that-
was like in a phone and it was spooky and he was like... He was about to do something ominous, and I hadn't seen these lyrics, so when he was talking about cutting God down and all that, I was like, this guy, man, you better be careful. I'm say a prayer for you, young man. But yeah, I thought the metal was crazy. Like the riffs were like... This is some pretty heavy shit that we've been listening to for the Trivium song. I thought was good. This song was just like straight, very, very heavy. What did you think of the vocals? You mentioned the vocals.
Oh, I loved him.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I can't figure out which death vocals, if that's what we still call it. I can't tell. Anyway, like, I don't know which ones, why some of them I'm like, ugh. And then
Right.
some of them I'm like, I love that.
Right.
Some of them just are so inspiring-ish, you know, like they just kind of get to you and kind of get in you and they make you feel like doing it with them and stuff. Like
Yeah.
that's how this was. So I don't know what the difference is and I don't even know if there's a science behind it. Maybe it's just how I feel on a given day. I don't know.
Yeah. This guy was a little bit Cookie Monster-ish at some points. I wish it was a little bit clearer, but that's okay. But I think it matched the anger of the song, of where the song was going. Burn your heaven, flood your hell. Whoo! Drown you in your wishing wells.
Yeah, what's
good
the
line.
wishing wells? Is that what is that? When people
wishing well,
wish that
yeah.
God would come to them and
No, you just a little penny.
well,
in
yeah,
your-
I know, but God has wishing wells.
No, I think he's saying the concept of God is a form of...
Yeah, so when people putting out their wishes and stuff, he's going to drown you.
You're
basically
gonna drown
you
in
in
the-
all the wishes and all the people that wanted you to talk and drown you in that.
Yeah, drown you
Yeah,
in,
okay,
your,
that
in, your
makes sense.
false, in your false belief. It's just a wishing well. All this stuff in God and theology, it's all a big wishing well. It's a very good sense of irony to drown somebody in their wishing well. Burning down heaven, flooding hell. You know, that's this guy is like an almighty figure in his own mind at some level. But I think he's talking about the power of disbelief. You know, and that's the power of disbelief. And I think there's a ton of power in faith, and I also think that there's a ton of power in disbelief.
Yeah.
I think having belief, having firm belief gives you security about life, and I think having firm disbelief also gives you security about life. Gives you a sense of control and security. You say, okay, I don't believe in God, so anything bad that happens, I already expected it to happen because there was no God.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas we would say, anything that bad that happens, I trust God that there's some good, hidden reason behind it. So both of us are trying to come up with ways to psychologically deal with the horribleness of what it means to live in a fallen world.
Yep.
And the risk of loving a person. Because the minute that you love a person, the clock's
You
starting.
set yourself,
That's it.
yeah.
That relationship is going to end one way or the other. You're going to lose the person one way or the other. And so that's why I always say to myself...
Very encouraging.
Well, but that's why I always say to myself, it depends on what you think the ultimate goal of life is. And that's why, to me, the ultimate goal of life can't be just on the human level. It's impossible to me. You know, there's got to be something bigger than that because... you form these significant relationships, but they're all going to end. That's to me, nature's telling us something with that. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about your kids. There's something bigger. So that's where I'm with it. But I want you and the kids always. So don't go anywhere.
I'm not.
I'll find you.
Good.
I'll take you home.
Good.
I'll put you in the bed.
Good.
I'll tie you up.
Good.
And you won't be able to escape.
Oh,
I'll feed you
okay.
Chipotle.
Good.
Vin out.
Sorry out.
Gone. Sparky too. But Sparky doesn't have any hands, so alright, it's just
Oh my gosh.
Sparky almost died. Alright, well, gone.
Bye.
I'll smile and tell you I'm just fine. Well, down in silence, screaming till I fucking bleed. Because when everyone's expendable and your heart can take the weight, the last thing that you wish for is the face to face.